welcome back to my studio. Thank you for choosing to spend a little bit of your time with me today. So for today's video, I am going to show you how I created this beauty. So stick around with me and I'll take you through the whole process. So this is a 24-inch pine board. I have push pins in, the back is painted black, and I have taped around the edge, and I'm just going to make sure that tape is really burnished down well. And here I'm just adding a French cleat to the back. I decided it's going to be a lot easier to do this now than later when there's crystals and everything on the front and I can't get it to lay flat. And I do really prefer to use a French cleat when I'm working with a piece that's going to be this heavy. That French cleat is going to make it really secure on the wall. Here you can see where I had roughly drawn in the composition that I want for this piece. And I'm just going through now and painting the areas that are going to have druzy on them. And I'm painting those black so that they have a nice solid background. Now here I decided to add a little bit of foam to the places where I'm going to add my crystals, and that's just to build up a little bit of height. And this is just plain old packing foam. It's something I saved from some packaging. And once I get it to the size I want, then I kind of bevel the edges a little bit, which I'm not sure that you'll be able to see that clearly on the screen, but it just makes it a little easier to create a nice smooth mound. And I'm just adhering it with some hot glue. Here I have some molds for crystals, and I'm creating some crystals that I'm going to use in this project. So I'm putting these labradorite chips in to begin with, and I'm just putting those kind of close to the tips so that they add some real interest to these pieces. While I was adding the labradorite chips, I had put some clear epoxy resin into a vacuum machine to get the bubbles out, and I'm just pouring that into the molds here about halfway up. So I'm not filling this up with the clear. I'm gonna fill it halfway, and then I'm going to add a little bit of mica powder to my clear resin and fill it up the rest of the way. Now my goal when I am doing crystals for a specific project is to pour them with enough time that I can demold them when they're still a little bit flexible. That way it's a little easier for me to mold them into the project, and they look a little more natural that way. Here I'm just adding in my crystals now, and I'm using hot glue to do that. And this is just to set them in place. I'm gonna put more epoxy on them later, and that's what's going to really hold them in. So the hot glue is just to get the ball rolling and get things where I want them to be. Now, if you're using a foam riser like this, make sure that you are using low temperature hot glue and that your hot glue gun is on low, otherwise you'll melt the foam. Here I'm just showing another option for creating height if you don't want to use the foam. And this is just some really chunky fire pit glass that I'm using here. Here I have my druzy mixed. Now I didn't show exactly how I did this, and that's because I have a whole video dedicated to druzy, so if you want to check that out, I will link that below. And another thing I forgot to mention is I did end up putting a tape dam around, and unfortunately I didn't have my camera shooting down enough to really see this, but it's going to help keep that druzy edge nice and clean, so that the druzy stays on the round and just creates a nice even edge. And then I'm going to start adding in my artificial crystals that I created, and the epoxy that's already in the druzy is going to act like glue there. So if you want to add a little more epoxy to the back of those crystals, you can, but I haven't really found it necessary. And then the other thing is I am adding just a little bit of druzy kind of around all of my crystal clumps. That's gonna hide the hot glue, and it's going to make it look like the crystals are growing out of the druzy. And I do really like that effect. And I'm just using a paper towel that's wet with isopropyl alcohol to clean the area up of any of the dropped druzy. And after I was looking at it for a while, I decided it needed just a little something else. So I grabbed some of my real geodes. They're really small ones, and I am just adding those with a little more epoxy I mixed up. The druzy had already started to cure for a while, so I wanted to make sure that these stuck really well. And I decided that it needed just a little more height to it, so I decided to add in one more real crystal clump here. I have Yoru Black from Eye Candy. This is a nice metallic sparkly black. I have Black Dye from Illumilite, mixed nice and opaque. I have Blue Blood from Eye Candy. This is a really cool interference kind of color shift mica. I have Fossil Gray from Eye Candy. I have Opulent Tanzanite from Mayspring. This is a gorgeous deep blue. And then I have translucent blue from Alumilite. There we go. So you can probably see here there's a little bit of texture on the board, and it's obviously painted black now instead of white. And that's because I did a pour that went badly, and I just decided to start from scratch. So what I do in this sort of case is I give everything a good scuff sanding. I paint, I wait another 24 hours, and then I just do it again. And I'm just laying my colors down. I like there to be a little more of an organic flow to my geodes versus kind of more of a what I would consider agate style pour, where you have really clean, crisp lines with your epoxy. And that just really comes down to personal style and preference. And I'm just using my fingers to blend it ever so slightly. And then I am going to hit it with a spritz of isopropyl alcohol to make those really cool effects that you get. And then here I'm adding in just a little bit of veining with my gold. And then I'm just going to hit it with my torch really well and give it one more spritz with the isopropyl alcohol. So here I am removing my tape edge, and I've allowed the epoxy to cure until it's just set, but it's still just a tiny bit soft. And what I do is I take some isopropyl alcohol and I keep my glove wet with the isopropyl alcohol, and I use that to smooth the edges of the epoxy down to meet the wood so that there isn't a visible ledge there. And here I'm taking a mixture of gloss varnish and my gold mica powder to create a paint that I'm going to use to do the edge of my geode. I wanted to add a little bit of definition to my geode, so I decided to add some gold lines in. And I'm using this 3D foil glue, and I cannot recommend it. I was actually really unhappy with it at the end. It's really hard to get this glue to flow smoothly and evenly. So I ended up with some clumps and bumps, and the problem with that is, especially with this glue, is you kind of have a working time where it dries to a tackiness, and that's when you want to put the foil on. And because I had trouble getting it to flow smoothly, I had some areas that were thicker than others. So the areas that were thin dried too fast, and the areas that were thick dried too slowly. So it was kind of a struggle to get my gold foil on in the end. And here I'm using my gold transfer foil, and I do like to use a transfer foil here versus gold leaf because it's a little bit cleaner. If you try and use gold leaf with all of these little barbs from the druzy, the gold leaf gets stuck everywhere, so the transfer foil really works a lot better in this sort of situation. And I just realized while I'm editing that I somehow forgot to turn on my camera when I did my final clear epoxy coat over this. So once I got all my gold foil on, I let it sit for another day, and then I just did a final clear coat of epoxy over everything except the druzy, obviously. And this is going to help protect the gold leaf to keep it from tarnishing and just give a little more depth to the piece overall. And then lastly, when I was doing that clear coat of epoxy, I also added a couple of stones while I was doing that, and those stones were blue jade. Here we are with the final walkthrough. Now, I was really hoping that I was going to get this outside to show you in the sunshine, but it's been dreary for a couple of days now, so I decided to just go ahead and show you in my studio. Sorry for the glare. I'm really happy with how all of this turned out. These stones added such a nice touch. The druzy looks so crystally and natural. I think the whole thing just works really well together. Okay, let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know if you want to see more geodes. And until the next time, I hope you have a beautiful day.